We have this consistent, constant need for improvement, and that is essentially designed into the evolutionary process itself. Like that's what led single-celled organisms to divide, become multi-celled organisms, to get out of the ocean, to seek land, to seek shelter, to seek improvements in, altering its environment in order to protect itself from predators, which led us to the 21st century, to where we are today, having this conversation that somehow, I don't know if you understand it, but I don't understand how my voice is being processed down into ones and zeros and pumped through the sky, and people are getting it on their phone right now as they're driving in their car. This is madness. This is a mad, mad, mad world. And what's the urge behind all of it? Well, it's this biological need for innovation, this biological need for constant improvement, and it's designed in the evolutionary process itself. I mean, it's a part of the evolutionary process. I mean, why do animals evolve? Why don't they just say, fuck it, if these fish keep grabbing us, let's just stay the same color and go extinct? No, the bugs, they start look like, have you seen caterpillars that look like predators? They develop eyes on their backs so that they can look scary, so that less animals eat them, or at least they've gotten to that point where that design. I mean, I don't know how you can ever really truly completely explain some of these butterflies that have these elaborate images that have sort of emerged throughout, I mean, how many hundreds of thousands or millions of years of evolution. But it's incredibly fascinating that they've develop this need to figure out how to trick animals so that they can continue to breed. They've improved, they've innovated. And that's that. If you could really talk to a butterfly and go, listen, dude, you only live a week. Why fuck? What do you care? Like, if you die or your relatives die, what kind of a bullshit life is this? You live a week, you fly around, people go, ooh, look at the butterfly, and then it's over. Like, let a bunch of lizards eat you. Let's just get this over with. Let's, come back as a better bug. Figure out how to exist as a microbe inside the body of the animals that are eating you, and then develop from its poop into some magical plant that enlightens the people that eat it or something. But living as a butterfly is bullshit. But they don't think that way. There's just this, it's part of this process, this continue to innovate, constantly push forward, make things better.
Okay, my interpretation of that clip is that Joe Rogan believes that caterpillars have a desire to innovate and change. Almost as though the caterpillar is aware of what it needs to change so that it can survive. It seems as though Joe thinks that there is some kind of consciousness and foresight involved when it comes to evolution, and that evolution is some kind of mechanism for the caterpillar to use. Well, basically, evolution is all about reproduction and how the environment influences reproduction. If a caterpillar can reproduce its genes, in other words, have children, then those genes will survive. So if a caterpillar has children, and those children have children, and that child has another child, and so on, then as time passes, the genes will survive. If a caterpillar can't reproduce its genes because it can't survive due to the environment, for example, has characteristics such as it can't get to food, gets eaten, falls off the tree and gets squashed, etc., then that type of caterpillar will die out. The world is constantly changing. If the caterpillar isn't in a biological state to survive in its environment, then it will die out, which means it will be unable to reproduce, and that caterpillar will be history, like many biological beings before it. This too is why there is current mass extinction of animals, because of the change in environment, such as deforestation, pollution, human activity, etc. But anyway, now how does a caterpillar get an eye on its back? It seems crazy that that could happen. Well, imagine you have a box of matches and you throw the matches onto the ground. Do this enough times and the matches will form a shape on the ground, maybe like a triangle. You know that the matches aren't conscious. They didn't all get together and choose to make a certain shape. Instead, it was just chance that all the variables resulted in the matches landing in a certain shape. It's the same for evolution. Say that you have a type of caterpillar that are all genetically the same and are on the same tree and have the same access to food and the same threat from predators. This means that they will all have roughly the same chance of death. And if a particular caterpillar dies, that means they won't have kids and won't pass on their genes. Now say that one of the caterpillars has mutated genes due to some radiation from the sun or something. And the change in the genes means the caterpillar has a yellow dot on their back. The yellow dot actually doesn't make their ability to survive any better or worse than all the other caterpillars. So this means that they have the same chance of survival. Now, generations later, one of the other caterpillar's genes mutates. This mutation results in a big black dot on the caterpillar's back. It looks roughly like an eye to some of the dumb birds that eat caterpillars. So this means the birds are scared of the caterpillar with the black dot and decide to eat the other caterpillars that don't have the black dot. So, over time, all the caterpillars without the black dot, including the ones with the yellow dot, will have a higher chance of death by getting eaten, which means over time they will die out. However, some of the caterpillars with the black dot still get eaten because some of the birds are smarter than others and realize that the black dots aren't eyes. So then, generations later, one of the caterpillar's genes mutate, which results in the black dot having a pink inner dot. This actually makes the black dot look less like an eye to the birds. So this caterpillar has a higher chance of being eaten compared to the other caterpillars, and eventually gets eaten, which means it never has a chance to have children and pass on its genes. Then, generations later, one of the caterpillar's genes mutates, which results in the black dot having a white inner dot. This makes the caterpillar's black dot look more like an eye to the birds. So most birds are scared of it. So it means the caterpillar has more chance of survival and having children. In comparison, the caterpillars with only the black dot with no white inner dot have less chance of survival. So imagine this keeps happening. The caterpillars that have mutations that make the black dot look more like an eye have higher chance of survival. So after incremental changes over many, many generations, the dot on the caterpillar ends up looking quite like an eye. There was no conscious decision of the caterpillar to try to start looking like an eye, and there was no external being that one day put a perfect eye on a caterpillar. Instead, the environment, in this example the bird, constrained what mutations of the caterpillar would survive. And the bird wasn't conscious of the big narrative. It was just looking for food, avoiding what it saw as threats. It was the interaction of the environmental variables that led to this, just like the pile of matches forming a shape. Of course, there were certain contributors or constraints to create this. For example, the matchbox, number of matches, throwing motion, distance, and doing this process over and over again until a shape is formed. But this is the same as the caterpillar. You have the caterpillar, its tree, the thing that mutates some of the genes, the sun, the characteristics of the predators, all these environmental factors that contribute or constrain the path of how the caterpillar can evolve. And the caterpillar doesn't have a choice if its genes will be mutated by the sun or not. Also, consider that as these caterpillars evolve, all the other types of caterpillars are evolving too. Say the other types become more camouflaged or have spikes, and as these caterpillars are evolving, so are their predators. Maybe the birds that eat the caterpillars have evolved to have better vision and can now recognize that the eye on the back of the caterpillar really isn't an eye. So then bang, the caterpillars with the black dot that looks like an eye start getting eaten up even quicker. The population drops, and eventually the last of its kind gets eaten, and that species of caterpillar is gone for eternity. Maybe one day dug up as a fossil if it's lucky. So really, there is no narrative, no design to what there is now. It's not like someone said, we'll have birds like this, and then we'll have caterpillars with eyes on their backs. Those are just human constructs, constructed values that we place on the world to try to make it all have meaning. It's really just the crashing of variables since the beginning of time that resulted in the caterpillar having an image that looked like an eye on its back, and for its predators to be in a state where it sees that image of an eye as a false threat. The variables are still crashing though. It's all still going forward and change is constant. This is why the balance of nature is a fallacy. Nature has never had a stable state. It is in constant change. However, Don't let this be an excuse for humanity causing environmental destruction and wiping out species.
The collapse of his experiment marked the end of the systems theory, which had driven the science of ecology for 50 years. The theory that somewhere in nature is an ultimate order, a balanced equilibrium.
The balance of nature is an illusion, and we hold on to it just so tightly in our culture. That is completely counter to what contemporary ecology tells us. Contemporary ecology says that we live in a very dynamic world. You have to replace that assumption of the balance of nature. You have to discard the myth